Well, as promised, we will look at the stratosphere, what's going on at the moment, and also the prospects of what influence that may have as we go later into the month of March and into April. Thanks for clicking on to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. And this upcoming Sunday, we have the all important live stream Global Weather and Climate Report edition 84. So if you have the time, at around 4 p.m. Between 4 p.m. and 4:45 p.m. I'll be live right here at Mark Hogan Weather HQ, answering some of your questions, giving you a shout out, and also looking at what's going on. As you can see with the title, it's increased blocking potential as the stratospheric winds reverse. We'll look at what the prospects that may have for not only here in the UK, Ireland, and much of Europe, but also looking at the global implications of this ongoing wind reversal within the polar stratosphere. So, if you haven't already done so, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully, you'll be available Sunday afternoon for the upcoming live stream. So, there is plenty of things going on. The weather, relatively speaking, is fairly quiet here in our neck of the woods, but there is plenty going on within the northern hemisphere. We've had some record breaking cold conditions across northern India, Pakistan, that central swathe of Asia. And you can see if we look at the current temperature anomaly for the first week of March, it is a very warm one for North America. This is the United States, actually, central and eastern United States, and also much of Ontario and Quebec seeing a very, very warm opening week to March. Incidentally, we've got a fairly cold start across parts of British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and also the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, down through California and Nevada. We've seen the significant snowfall. We've seen the increase in snowpack within the Sierra Nevada in recent times as well. So that is going to certainly be a big help as we move towards the dry season in California and the West. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail this upcoming Sunday in the live stream. Also, looking at Europe, this is interesting here. So this is the first 7 days of March, and you can see that England and Wales is below average, ever so slightly above average now through the central belt of Scotland, and probably close to average, slightly above average across Scotland. Big turnaround over Scandinavia in recent times. Remember, really from about October, November, December, January, I think even February, marginally so as well. We had that run of below average temperatures. The first time we've had really 4 or 5 months consecutively below freezing, below average, should I say? Let's get it right. Below average is the first time since 2009-10. I think that is correct in what I'm saying. We've also got below average conditions across much of France and especially Iberia, so Spain and Portugal, with the split in the jet, one arm going south, one arm going north. We're seeing low pressure systems moving into Iberia. Bucket loads of rainfall across the northwest, especially in exposure of the Atlantic Ocean. But those systems moving in off the Atlantic is bringing quite significant amounts of rainfall and problematic conditions across parts of northern Portugal and northern Spain in response. Europe remains warmer than average through the majority of the continent, with the exception of that southwest corner. And it'll be interesting to see how things turn around as we go forward. So, mean zonal winds. The winds circling the polar vortex, we are at very low levels at the moment, in reverse at minus 15 to minus 20. So we are seeing the winds blowing the opposite of what they typically would be. Remember that the usual time for the final stratospheric warming is usually mid to late April. That, I believe, is statistically when the winds reverse for the end of winter and beginning of summer. That's what happens. We eventually warm up the stratosphere, and the polar vortex is basically dead until it starts to redevelop once again during the latter half of summer and through the early portions of autumn. That's when you start to find the polar vortex starts to increase once again and redevelop, because the sun angle within the high latitudes starts to lower, we start to lose the incoming solar radiation within the Arctic region, and therefore the column starts to turn colder and colder, and those winds surrounding the polar vortex start to accelerate. But it's been a very strange winter overall. We've had ongoing stratospheric warmings really from autumn right the way through till early springtime. There is a possibly going to be a study into this winter in terms of really how that's been the case. We all know it's been a strange winter. I personally think that a lot of the reason for these stratospheric warmings has been the level of warmth that we've seen within the tropical and mid latitude latitudes of the planet, increasing the depth of the troposphere. We've also seen shots of cold air getting driven south, especially over Asia. And that, if you pinpoint where the origin of these stratospheric warmings have taken place, it's actually been, I think, more so over the center of Asia. And this is where we've had the biggest clash zones between astonishing winter warmth and midwinter cold. When those two collide, that has a propagating influence of pushing up through the troposphere and influencing the lower stratosphere. That is my very, very crude, very basic potential reasoning for why we've seen such stratospheric warmings this winter overall. What's also interesting is the lack of influence from these stratospheric warmings as we've progressed through, particularly the second half of this winter season. I think a lot of that is to do with the overall warm backdrop, ocean, land, and atmosphere, but also the El Nino influence has been, I think, quite prevalent, especially later in January and particularly through the month of February. It's just been astonishingly warm across the majority of the northern hemisphere. But you can see here that we are firmly in reversed mean zonal winds right the way through till the very end of the month. And then it looks as if the ECMWF tries to reignite the westerlies within the polar stratosphere by the time we reach the very beginnings of April. So therefore, this would not constitute a final warming. It looks as if that the polar vortex is going to have one last fight at getting going once again, which is quite interesting. But what influence is this actually having? This is one thing that I wanted to show you because I thought it was quite interesting. Some technical stuff I know a lot of folk might be like, I don't have a clue what that means. But there is some folk on the channel that does understand a little bit more than others. And I thought this was a fascinating tweet here by Dr. Amy Butler, who is an expert with regards to sun stratospheric warmings, along with Dr. Simon Lee. But she says in this tweet here that tropical lower stratosphere is setting some new daily record low temperatures. Why would that be the case? So basically, the stratosphere over the equatorial region, over the tropics, is cooling, but that's because it's in response. In my opinion, anyway, it's in response to the warming, the strong warming, this pushing cold out of the stratosphere over the high latitudes, over the Arctic region, is therefore forcing the polar vortex to sink southwards down towards the mid latitudes, but it's also in turn filtering further down towards the equatorial portion of the stratosphere and forcing it to cool. Is that going to have any sort of influence? I don't know, but I just thought, regardless whether you understand what I'm talking about or not, I thought that was quite a fascinating piece of information. What influence that may or may not have, I do not know. She goes on to say that the colder than normal temperatures in the lower stratosphere are helped along by the easterly QBO. So remember, we've had the QBO. I think that's been having an influence, a fighting influence against other aspects, such as the strong positive Indian Ocean dipole. The very strong easterly QBO that we've got going at the moment has been helping develop or help bring some sort of winter, I think, this year. I think if we had a westerly QBO combined with a positive Indian Ocean dipole, I think December, January, and February would have been a lot warmer overall. Probably would have been one of the warmest, if not warmest, winters on record. Now, I could be wrong with that, but certainly I think the East QBO has helped us bring some cold to Europe. You might say to yourself, where was the cold? Where was the snow? Well, remember, early December, mid-January, we did see cold spells. Up until the winter, up until the 24th of January, was in fact average to below average. It's just February and the final 10 days of January blew the entire winter out of the water in terms of overall temperature. But certainly, nonetheless, an interesting little side comment with regards to what's going on within the stratosphere. That strong warming from the Arctic is helping cool the stratosphere towards the equator here, and I thought that would be something worth or may or may not be of interest to you. Looking at the 70 HPA temperature, so this is the influence of the lower stratosphere and how I think it's influencing the 500 millibar or the top of the troposphere. So remember, the troposphere is where our weather exists. The stratosphere is the layer above the troposphere. When the stratosphere warms up, it expands. It forces the contraction of the troposphere underneath. So basically, the depth of the stratosphere increases, the troposphere decreases underneath where that stratospheric warming takes place. And what that does is it forces the heights to rise underneath within the troposphere. If you've got the downwelling, the energy getting driven down through the column and affecting the troposphere underneath. So we've got strong blocking, as you can see here, in the same areas that we've had throughout much of this winter. East Asia, over the top of the pole, down towards North America here. So keeping in mind the ongoing wind reversal, what influence is that possibly having as those winds reverse? The column within the stratosphere is warmed up. The polar vortex is all but wiped out. It's getting forced down into the mid latitudes. If you look at the same level within the lower stratosphere by the time you reach 168 hours, which is exactly 1 week from now, you notice that we've got strong blocking right over the top of the pole. That's quite interesting. Then if you look, the Arctic oscillation seen by the GFS ensemble is expected to go negative. So we've got positive heights over the Arctic at 500 millibars, and we've got lower heights further south. Taking it further, you can see here that the positive heights are in the reds. We've got the negatives in the blues here. As we play through the ECMWF weeklies here, the 7-day increments, you notice what's taking place. So you have to tilt your head. This is the UK and Ireland here. There's the strong block, Scandinavia, extending over to Greenland at the moment. We've got the deep negative down towards the Bay of Biscay, hence why we're seeing all that weather moving into northwestern Iberia, southern portions of France. We've got wet-ish conditions across southern UK, very dry conditions across the north, because the northern half of the UK is closest to the block. Now watch what happens. Remember what I've just said with regards to the stratosphere down into the troposphere, the influence on the 500 millibar pattern. And this is the 500 millibar geopotential height anomaly. Upcoming 7 days this is. Play through the loop. You notice here that we start to see the reversal, and look at all the positives showing up towards the very end of this month. So this is the period between the 23rd and the 30th of March. Remember what I showed you here. This is 70 HPA. Look at where the blocking is showing up. And this is at 500 millibars by the time we reach the end of the month here. So we've got the negative Arctic oscillation. We've also got the negative North Atlantic oscillation. There's the trough over the UK and over western portions of Europe. If we look at Europe in particular, specifically, also the United States, by the way, central and eastern United States has that trough also. So this is a classic spring-like blocking situation developing. Now you would say to yourself, would that not suggest a cold outbreak late March into early April? It is possible that we have a colder than average pattern. That being said, we have to have colder in place to have a cold pattern in the first place. Does that make sense? So this is the same period, 23rd of March through the 30th of March. There's the block to the north of the UK. We've got the negative here across the south. My sway is towards a wetter than average March. Spain, Portugal, France, and possibly the southern UK, firmly drier than average across the north. That is my thinking at the moment. Let's have a look at the precipitation anomalies here. You can see here the 7-day increments. So this is the same period, 23rd through the 30th, and we've got the drier than average Scandinavia, Iceland, northern UK, weather than average across Iberia, France, and edging possibly into the southern UK. Looking at temperature anomaly, now my suggestion would be it's slightly below average. You would think so, but it depends on the air mass that we've got in place. This is the 850 anomaly, by the way, for the same time frame. So this is the temperature difference compared to average at 5,000 feet over our heads, and it is below average. Looking at the surface temperature anomaly for the same time frame, and you can see here that it is below average. And this may thwart my overall ideas for March in terms of being average to above average temperatures. So you can understand the complications in this setup overall. The pattern is favourable for cold, but given what we've seen in February, given the fact that we've got a real lack of cold air over Europe, like I've said in recent times before, it would not surprise me if we get some sort of wintry outbreak towards the mid portions of spring. So that being end of March and through April. Wouldn't be surprised if we have quite a dry and fairly chilly April, given the fact that the stratospheric warming is so pronounced at the moment. We've got a long spell of mean zonal winds reversed to an easterly. That could have lasting impacts on the overall pattern. Looking at let's have a quick look at the just the here and now and the temperature, the weather pattern as we go forward. So there's all that traffic. Look at the low pressure getting driven south around the base of that block across the north of the UK and Scandinavia. We've got east to southeasterly winds. We've got a lot of cloud cover getting driven in. Those water temperatures 6-7 Celsius within the North Sea as that air crosses over. Even if the air mass itself is relatively mild, it's being cooled as it crosses the relatively cold North Sea waters, and then it has influence, cloud cover, foggy conditions, chilly, nagging easterly wind. Further west, in the shelter, we tend to have more in the way of sunshine and warmer temperatures. This is the time of the year that you can get big diurnal fluctuations in temperature, big differences between east and west depending on where the wind direction is, cloud cover versus sunshine, etc., etc. This is the time of the year that is primed for that. But look at all the areas of low pressure. Look at the weather moving in across parts of France, Central Europe. Look at Iberia. As we play through the loop here, you can see all that wet weather getting driven by a strong wind coming in off the North Sea, or Atlantic actually, by a 971 millibar area of low pressure. And this is classic, by the way, of a sudden stratospheric warming and blocking pattern. So I emphasize the point that I made yesterday. Blocking patterns doesn't necessarily equate to cold patterns. Sudden stratospheric warmings tend to respond to the 500 millibar pattern, but without any cold air in place, you don't have a cold pattern. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. Strat warmings mean blocking patterns. It means a slowdown and a buckling of the jet stream, forcing it north in one place, forcing it south in another place. But you can see here that we've got plenty of wet weather across southwestern Europe, drier the further north you go over the UK and Ireland. But then, as you notice here, as we move through Saturday, we've got a belt of rain moving northwards. How far north that gets remains to be seen, but you can see the overall situation. As we move into early next week, the GFS actually has systems coming in off the Atlantic, which is interesting. So it's actually showing the Atlantic coming back into play once again. But so we might have a temporary return of the Atlantic. But look at this here by the time we reach Friday the 22nd. This is a long way out, obviously. But look at this here. We've got the blocking showing up once again. We've got the cold northerly flow, and we've got snow showers coming in as well. We've got snow on the northern flank of a boundary here, heavy rainfall across southern UK. Then as you move into the colder air through the Midlands, through mid Wales, etc., we could have snow potential as well. So this is the possibility later down the road in response to that stratospheric warming. So I think I've covered enough think I've spoken long enough. I will be taking tomorrow off, so no video tomorrow, but back with the all important live stream Global Weather and Climate Report edition 84 on Sunday. I hope you can stay available for that and interact with the live stream. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, enjoy your Saturday, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you on Sunday afternoon live here from our phone Weather HQ. Bye for now.